He smiles, he flatters, he says all the right things, and he calls himself a good man. But behind that polished exterior, behind the soft voice, the curated humility, and the carefully chosen words, there's nothing solid. No steel, no fire, just a hollow shell, brittle, anxious, desperate to be seen as strong, without doing what strength requires. Machiavelli didn't fear tyrants. He feared the weak man pretending to be strong, because that man is dangerous in the worst way. He cracks under pressure and takes others down with him. The tyrant reveals himself, but the weak man, he hides behind virtue. He whispers peace while avoiding confrontation. He performs strength but never lives it. This is not a video about masculinity. It's not about alpha or beta. It's about power, and how weakness, when disguised, becomes a silent poison. Because weak men don't just fail, they infect, they erode empires, they betray their partners, and when they collapse, they blame the world for the weight they never trained to carry. Today, you'll learn to see through the mask, not with judgment, but with ruthless clarity. Here are the 8 signs you're dealing with a weak man. According to psychology and the modern masters of discipline, it is better to act and repent than not to act and regret. Machiavelli, the weak man, does not dream of conquest. He dreams of comfort, not victory, but escape, not glory, but ease. He'll say things like, "Now's not the right time. I'm just protecting my peace. I don't want to force anything." But beneath those words is not wisdom. It's fear. Fear of pain, fear of effort, fear of the grind that greatness demands. Where the strong man sees discomfort as a forge, the weak man sees it as a fire to flee. In Can't Hurt Me, David Goggins writes, "We all have an inner savage, but most people let it sleep forever because they're afraid to suffer." The weak man will spend a lifetime avoiding hard things. He avoids hard conversations, delays decisions that require risk, distracts himself with entertainment, food, sex, and self-help. He never applies. He does just enough to survive, never enough to dominate. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, says, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." The weak man has no system, only moods. He builds his life around escape routes, Netflix, excuses, therapy speak. He's healing from things he never endured, and avoiding things that would actually make him strong. He might even wear the language of growth. "I'm focusing on my inner child. I'm not ready to be triggered. I need alignment before action." And while some of that has its place, he weaponizes it to delay responsibility. Resistance is always lying and always full of it. The War of Art, by Stephen Pressfield, calls this resistance. Resistance will tell you anything to keep you from doing your work. It will perjure. It will fabricate. The strong man knows this. He understands that struggle is not optional. It's the only road he trains. He shows up. He walks through fire when required. The weak man, he folds at the first sign of friction, like a sandcastle facing the tide. Beautiful to look at, until it's tested. And worse, his weakness is contagious. If you stay around him long enough, you start lowering your standards, avoiding your own grind, calling cowardice calm. That's the real cost of comfort addiction. It doesn't just kill your goals, it kills your identity. In The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey writes, "If you don't choose your response, you become a product of your environment." The weak man is a product, molded by comfort, mastered by fear. So ask yourself, does he avoid discomfort while pretending to be at peace? Does he use softness to mask surrender? Does he fear resistance more than Then you're not looking at a man preparing for power. You're looking at a man disguising his collapse as balance. And Machiavelli would say this clearly: the man who avoids struggle is unfit to rule, unfit to protect, and unfit to lead. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men around him. Machiavelli, the second method: watch how he handles his own storms. Because the weak man is not led by strategy, he is ruled by sensation. He doesn't think, he reacts. He doesn't assess, he erupts. He believes every emotion deserves expression. Every feeling must be voiced. He'll tell you, "I'm just being honest." But in truth, he's bleeding in public. He'll explode during a disagreement, collapse into silence after rejection, panic when a plan doesn't go his way. And worse, he broadcasts it all. In his voice, on his face, and on social media. Ryan Holiday, in Ego is the Enemy, warns, "Emotions are what we feel, not what we are. They must be questioned, not obeyed." But the weak man obeys them all. He posts angry rants before processing the facts. He storms out before asking for clarity. He spills secrets not out of trust, but out of insecurity. He calls it transparency. But transparency without control is just strategic vulnerability handed to your enemies. Machiavelli would consider this man a puppet with visible strings. Because here's the truth: whoever can trigger you. Stephen Covey, in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, defines maturity as the ability to pause between stimulus and response. The weak man has no pause. He only has a fuse. So when things go wrong, he flinches. When he's criticized, he spirals. When he's forced to wait, he quits. Not because the goal is impossible, but because his ego feels bruised by the delay. Jocko Willink, in Discipline Equals Freedom, says, detachment is power. Step back, analyze. But the weak man never steps back. He steps forward with rage, and regrets it later. This lack of emotional mastery is not just personal. It poisons everything around him. Relationships built on volatility, partnerships destroyed by mood swings, opportunities lost to impulsiveness. He doesn't lead people, he exhausts them. And the most dangerous part, he mistakes sensitivity for strength. He believes his ability to cry, to rage, to express, makes him real. But the real warrior, he feels deeply and acts deliberately. As the Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. Strength isn't the absence of emotion, it's the control of it. The lion doesn't show his wounds, the fox doesn't reveal his fear, but the weak man, he wears his emotional leash proudly, not knowing someone else is pulling it. So ask yourself, does he react more than he reflects? Does he need to vent before he plans? Does he lose composure when tested? If so, you're not looking at a leader. You're looking at a fuse disguised as a man ready to detonate over the slightest spark. Because in Machiavelli's world, predictability is weakness, and the man who can't control his face can't control his fate. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. Machiavelli, the weak man, isn't strong, but he wants you to think he is. He isn't grounded, but he wants to be praised like he's unshakable. So he covers the truth in glitter. He wears ambition like a costume. He doesn't pursue greatness, he performs it. Ryan Holiday, in Ego is the Enemy, says, impressing people is utterly different from being truly impressive. But the weak man doesn't know the difference. He lives for optics, not outcomes. He's the loudest in the room. He quotes books he hasn't read, he flaunts money he didn't earn. He copies masculinity instead of embodying it. Watch closely. He brags excessively, he exaggerates his wins. He hides behind designer labels, curated posts, and fake depth. He's not building power, he's building a stage, and every part of him depends on keeping that spotlight on. Mark Manson, in The Subtle Art of Not Giving AFCK*, explains, the more you desperately want to look strong, the weaker you actually are. The weak man craves the appearance of confidence because he lacks its source. His identity is outsourced, stitched together from influences, TikTok trends, and buzzwords. He doesn't know who he is, only who he wants to be seen as. And the irony, he thinks this performance will protect him, but performance is fragile. The first challenge, and it all falls apart. The swagger turns to silence, the confidence turns to panic, the charm turns to blame. Robert Greene, in The 48 Laws of Power, warns do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous, but this man doesn't build fortresses. He builds mirrors, so he can be admired, not respected. True strength is quiet. It doesn't need an audience, it doesn't need applause. It walks into a room and shifts the energy, without saying a word. But the weak man, he needs to be watched. If he's not being noticed, he doesn't feel real. That's why he posts endlessly. That's why he brags to strangers. That's why he never stops talking. David Goggins said it simply. Most people are running from the truth. You've got to own it. But the weak man doesn't own anything, especially not his own insecurity. Here's what you'll notice if you look long enough. Insecurity behind the smile, envy behind the compliment, desperation behind the confidence. He'll boast about success before doing the work. He'll shame others to feel superior. And when things don't go his way, he'll blame everyone but himself. So ask yourself, does he need to be seen to feel valid? Does he confuse clout with character? Does he perform strength, but collapse when challenged? Then you're not dealing with a man building power, you're dealing with a man renting it. For show. Because real power doesn't perform, it doesn't decorate itself. It just is. Calm/dangerous, unshakable. And in Machiavelli's world, the man who must prove he's powerful isn't. The prince must learn to act alone. Machiavelli, a weak man cannot be alone. Not because he craves connection, but because solitude reveals what he's been hiding from. In silence, there's no one to impress. No audience, no distraction, no feedback to feed on. Just him, and the truth echoing in the quiet. And the truth is this. He is empty. Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, writes, when a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. And this man is the king of distraction. He surrounds himself with noise, constant music, constant scrolling, constant company. Not because he enjoys stimulation, but because he can't face himself without it. He hops from group to group, opinion to opinion, relationship to relationship, always plugged into someone else's energy, because he has none of his own. Jocko Willink, in Discipline Equals Freedom, says, solitude is the battlefield where you meet your enemy, and it's always you. But the weak man never enters that battle, because he knows he'll lose. When left alone, he gets anxious, he overthinks, he drowns in boredom and self-loathing. and to escape it. He seeks anything, anyone, to validate him, distract him, rescue him. He'll say, I just hate being alone. I need people around me to function. I don't do well when I'm isolated. But this isn't about extroversion, it's about dependence. Because when there's no audience, he crumbles. And that's the danger. A man who can't be alone will become possessive, controlling, and manipulative. Not out of love, but out of fear. Stephen Pressfield in The War of Art puts it this way. Resistance will tell you anything to keep you from sitting down and doing your work. It will tempt you, distract you, seduce you, because it knows silence is where the real work begins. But the weak man avoids silence like death, because silence holds a mirror, and when he looks he doesn't like what he sees. The strong man, he uses solitude as a forge. He thinks, he sharpens, he prepares. He doesn't just endure loneliness, he chooses it when necessary. He knows something the weak man never learns. You don't find yourself in a crowd, you find yourself in the quiet. So ask yourself, does he panic when alone? Does he constantly need company, stimulation, or validation? Does he fill every silent moment because he's terrified of what might surface? Then you're not looking at a man preparing for greatness. You're looking at someone who fears his own reflection and needs people to distract him from it. Because in Machiavelli's world, if a man can't sit alone, he can't stand under pressure, and he certainly can't lead. The wise man does at once what the fool does at last. Machiavelli, a weak man, has no plan, no long game, no map, just a mood. He doesn't move with purpose. He lurches, he stumbles, he reacts, and then he calls it action. He jumps into relationships, business deals, goals, without direction, without discipline, without delay. Not because he's bold, but because he can't think 3 steps ahead. Robert Greene, in the 48 Laws of Power, warns, plan all the way to the end. The ending is everything. But the weak man isn't looking at the end. He's just trying to survive the next emotion. He's the kind of man who has goals but no systems, makes decisions out of fear, blames circumstances instead of building control. James Clear, in Atomic Habits, puts it plainly. Winners and losers have the same goals. What they don't share are systems. And the weak man has no system. He confuses busyness with progress, motion with movement, energy with efficiency. You'll hear him say, I'm working on a lot right now. I'm just seeing what happens. I go with the flow. But this isn't flow. It's drift. And drift destroys destiny. Because when life pushes back, and it always does, he panics, he spirals, he quits. Not because the goal was impossible, but because his ego couldn't handle slow progress. Jocko Willink in Extreme Ownership says, discipline equals freedom. If you want freedom, you must plan, you must lead. But the weak man doesn't lead. He follows his feelings, and they change by the hour. He's also easy to manipulate, because when a man doesn't have a strategy, anyone with one can control him. Trigger him and he'll lash out. Pressure him and he'll fold. Flatter him and he'll follow you off a cliff. He has no patience, no timing, no layers of thought. Sun Tzu, in The Art of War, said, victorious warriors win first, then go to war. Defeated warriors go to war first, then seek to win. This man goes to war unarmed, then blames the world when he's slaughtered. Even in relationships, in business, in friendship, he burns bridges in moments of ego. He speaks before securing leverage. He plays all his cards up front because he can't stand tension. He mistakes transparency for strength, when strength is often strategic silence. So ask yourself, does he act before thinking? Does he change direction based on mood? Does he respond emotionally, rather than moving with strategy? Then you're not looking at a leader. You're looking at a pawn walking into checkmate with his eyes wide open. Because in Machiavelli's world, reaction is weakness. Power is precision, and the man who cannot strategize will always be used by the man who can. It is far better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Machiavelli, the weak man, doesn't want power. He wants applause. He doesn't build integrity. He builds image. He walks into a room and doesn't ask, is what I'm doing right? He asks, do they like me for it? He bends, he flatters, he conforms, not out of diplomacy, but out of desperation. Ryan Holiday, in Ego is the Enemy, writes, the need to be seen as something is what separates the amateur from the professional. The weak man is forever the amateur. He doesn't stand on principle. He stands on performance. Built for feedback loops. Built for praise. He is a mirror, not a man. He reflects whoever he's around. Around strong men. He's agreeable around weak ones. He becomes competitive around women. He performs around enemies. He submits, he changes his words based on who's listening. Not because he's strategic, but because he's afraid to be disliked. Mark Manson, in The Subtle Art of Not Giving a FCK*, warns, the more you desperately want approval, the less you are seen as worthy of it. The weak man thinks likability is strength, but likability is fragile. It shatters in moments of truth. So when conflict arises, he folds. When hard choices come, he delays. When his values are tested, he abandons them to keep the peace. Because the weak man fears disapproval more than dishonor. Stephen Covey in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People puts it like this: when the voice of conscience clashes with the voice of popularity, maturity chooses conscience. The weak man never makes that choice. Because he doesn't hear conscience, he hears clapping. And when the clapping stops, so does his confidence. This shows up everywhere. He buys things to impress. He posts things to be admired. He conforms to trends that betray his own beliefs. He doesn't live for truth. He lives for reaction. And when the applause fades, he collapses into identity crisis. Because he never had one to begin with. Robert Greene said it simply: reputation is the cornerstone of power, but it must be built, not begged for. The weak man begs. So ask yourself, does he need compliments to function? Does he avoid difficult truth to remain liked? Does he chase popularity at the cost of principle? Then you're not dealing with a man prepared to rule. You're dealing with a puppet, dancing for the crowd, dying in silence. Because in Machiavelli's world, the man who fears rejection more than regret will always betray both himself and the people who follow him. A prince must learn how not to be good, and use that knowledge when necessary. Machiavelli, the weak man, fears many things, but above all, he fears confrontation. He fears raised voices. He fears hard truths. He fears being disliked for drawing the line. So he avoids conflict at all costs, even when it's required, even when silence means surrender. He tells himself, I'm just protecting my peace. It's not worth the drama. I don't want to be the bad guy, but let's be clear. That's not wisdom. That's not maturity. That's cowardice, disguised as virtue. Jocko Willink, in Extreme Ownership, says, you must be willing to confront. If you don't enforce the standard, you don't have one. And the weak man, he has no standards, just boundaries he lets others erase. Again and again, he tolerates disrespect to avoid discomfort. He forgives betrayal with no accountability. He lets manipulation go unchecked, then calls it compassion. He's not being the bigger person. He's being the smaller man, shrinking to fit into everyone else's comfort zone. Stephen Pressfield in The War of Art teaches, resistance will do anything to keep you from discomfort, even if it means your soul rots in the process. That's what this is. Rot beneath the mask of peace. Because peace without backbone is just surrender. You'll see this weakness most clearly in relationships. He lets others walk over him. He apologizes just to restore fake harmony. He fears speaking truth, even when silence is killing connection. In leadership, it's worse. He avoids firing toxic people. He won't give hard feedback. He trades clarity for consensus and loses both. And when power is finally taken from him, he acts surprised. But deep down, he knew. He gave it away every time he stayed silent. Robert Greene, in The 48 Laws of Power, said, if you are unsure, don't do it at all. Timidity is dangerous. Better to enter with boldness. And yet, the weak man is always unsure. He doesn't enter conflict with boldness. He avoids it, evades it, delays it, until the decision is made for him by someone stronger. Because that's what happens when you refuse to fight. You serve the one who doesn't. So ask yourself, does he shrink when challenged? Does he stay silent when truth must be spoken? Does he abandon responsibility to keep others comfortable? Then you're not dealing with a peacekeeper. You're dealing with a liability. Someone who will betray principle, loyalty, even you, just to avoid tension. Because in Machiavelli's world, conflict is not chaos. It's a weapon, and the man who refuses to wield it will live at the mercy of those who do. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must be both. Machiavelli, the weak man, doesn't know when to speak or when to stay silent. He doesn't know that in a world ruled by power, timing is everything, and exposure is fatal. He talks too soon, too much, to the wrong people. He believes announcing his goals makes them real. He believes speaking a dream aloud is progress. But in reality, he leaks his own power. Robert Greene, in The 48 Laws of Power, commands, conceal your intentions. Say less than necessary. Always leave people wondering. But the weak man, he tells everyone his plans, his moves, his strategies, before any of it is stable, before any of it is earned. Why? Because deep down he doesn't trust himself to follow through. So he looks to the outside world for momentum. He needs praise to act. He needs eyes to move. James Clear, in Atomic Habits, writes, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. But the weak man casts his vote with words, not action, and then wonders why nothing changes. He announces, I'm starting a business. I'm changing my life. Big things coming soon, and then nothing. Because he doesn't want to build the result. He wants to borrow the image. He wants the dopamine hit of admiration before he's done the work. This pattern makes him dangerous, not to others, but to himself. He invites doubt before there's proof. He invites sabotage before there's structure. He invites pressure before there's progress. And then when it collapses, he blames fate. But the Machiavellian, he knows better. He knows that power is quiet in the beginning. Power is planted in darkness, watered in silence, and revealed only when it's irreversible. The strong man, holds his cards, protects his vision, reveals only what's necessary, and only when it's useful he guards information like currency. Because he knows the truth, power isn't declared, it's felt. Ryan Holiday, ego is the enemy, writes, silence is strength. When we talk too much about what we're going to do, we use up the fuel we need to actually do it. So ask yourself, does he talk more than he builds? Does he chase applause before results? Does he expose his plans to feel powerful before becoming powerful? Then you're not looking at a strategist. You're looking at prey, loud, visible, and vulnerable. Because in Machiavelli's world, ambition that speaks too early, it ends up being silenced forever. Weakness can be disguised, decorated, explained away, but it always reveals itself. Under pressure, it cracks. Under scrutiny, it folds. Under responsibility, it infects everything around it. The weak man collapses, and in doing so betrays his mission, his people, and himself. But now you can see through the performance. The noise, the facade, you've been warned. Now you are armed. Because Machiavelli's truth is eternal. In a world of lions, the weak man dies pretending to be one.